Okay, hello folks. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to end this book with chapters 24, 25, and 26. And we finally get back to Franklin Moorhead, and you find out just who he was looking for in chapter 1. So, I hope you've enjoyed the book. I'm going to put a little extra on the very end if you would like to listen to it. It'll actually be a video because for some reason I looked for it. I didn't remember if I did it because I've done this so long ago. But there's a pretty lengthy prologue, or call it whatever you want, in the front of the actual written book, and I titled it "A Note from the Author." But it's kind of lengthy, and I'm just going to make a video basically of me reading it and add it on to the very end of this episode. So I hope you've enjoyed the book. I hope it wasn't a little too dark for you, and enjoy the end. Thanks. Chapter 24. It was Walter's last day as President of the United States. He sat at his desk trying to come to terms with the fact that he would not do this again. His phone gave a muffled beep. Yes? Sir, the President-elect is here. By all means, send him in. Walter got up and moved to a chair in front of the desk. The President-elect came in, looking around, kind of awestruck. Walter motioned to the chair behind the desk. Give it a try. It won't bite. Walter was amazed at how young the man looked, although there was very little difference in their ages. Soon you'll be as gray as me, Walter thought to himself. Howard Bowen, the President-elect, slowly settled into the chair and laid his hand on top of the desk, as if he was trying to absorb every sensation this moment had to give. After a few moments, Howard spoke up. You have done a phenomenal job of pulling this country back from the brink. I have to admit, it's a little intimidating trying to fill your shoes. Walter chuckled and said, I had the easy part. I just had to save the country. You have to save the world. From what? From itself. How the hell do I do that? Howard asked. Walter reached inside his coat pocket and produced a small black book. He casually tossed it across the desk. It's all in here. You must be joking. This is something you do to the new guy. Where are the hidden cameras? Oh, no. This is no joke. Do you think I came up with all those ideas that saved the country? You mean... That's right. They're all right there, and I only got halfway through the book. The rest is up to you. How do you know they are the right decisions? Hadn't been wrong yet. Now don't get me wrong. Some of them were hard and painful, but they were the right decisions. I dog-eared the page I stopped at, Walter finished. Howard picked up the small book cautiously, like it might explode at any time. Flipped through the pages till he found the dog-eared one, then turned to the next page. He read the main header at the top of the page, then began to stutter. You got to be kidding. How the hell am I going to control the world's population? Trust me, it won't be as hard as you think. If you read further down, it explains how to achieve this. Howard read down the page a little further, then replied, It can't be that easy. You will be amazed at what you can accomplish by just getting the ball rolling and let time do the rest, Walter replied. I have read it from cover to cover many times. Just do what you have time to and pass it on to the next president. So I don't have to do it all in my term? Howard asked. No, just make the next change and give the effects a chance to set in. You will find that the effects from the first change will help you accomplish the next change. It's kind of like a snowball effect. It took Howard 2 weeks to work up the nerve, but finally he called a meeting with the United States Ambassador to the United Nations. Benjamin Nathan sat outside the Oval Office, nervously looking around and shifting in his seat. He had no idea why he had been summoned. His main fear was that he would be fired, which was not uncommon with a presidential change. "You can go in now," the assistant told Benjamin. As Benjamin walked into the Oval Office, the president motioned to a chair in front of his desk. Benjamin nervously took a seat. "Tomorrow, I want you to address the United Nations and read this statement," Howard told Benjamin as he handed him a sheet of paper. Benjamin quickly scanned down the sheet, and his heart seemed to stop in his chest. He opened his mouth, but his voice refused to work. He looked up at the president. Howard, having anticipated his reaction, quickly added, "Don't worry. If there is any heat, I will take it." Yes, sir." Benjamin was finally able to get out. "Run along now." "Yes, sir." The next day, Benjamin stood at the podium of the United Nations. It was all he could do to control his nerves. His legs felt as if they would fail him at any moment. He stepped up to the microphone, tapped it to make sure it was on, gathered the remainder of his nerves, and started. "I have a brief statement from my government. As of today, the United States government will no longer give any form of aid to any nation, country, or state that does not have an active, viable population control." The room was dead silent. Benjamin tensed, knowing what was coming. As expected, the room exploded into total chaos. Dozens of diplomats were screaming in their own languages. Some were screaming at each other, but the majority was screaming at Benjamin. Benjamin simply turned and walked off the podium. To his surprise, his legs felt much stronger. Howard was catching up on some minor paperwork as he glanced at his watch. Almost showtime, he thought. He got up and walked down to the White House communications room. "Can I have everyone's attention?" The operators froze in midstream. Most had never met the president, let alone expected him to walk into the room. "All hell's about to break loose. Just do the best you can, and don't worry," Howard announced. Howard glanced at his watch, and as if on cue, every light on every phone lit up. Howard chuckled to himself and walked back to his office. By the middle of the following week, Howard had been called everything from the devil to the next Hitler by the world press. 2 weeks later, 2 other major countries announced policies along the same lines as the United States. Within a month, almost all other countries fell into line. 3 months later, Howard met with the Secretary of State. "How's the population control going?" Howard asked. "Just a handful of third world countries are still refusing due to religious beliefs," the Secretary answered. "Do you plan on dealing with them, sir?" he asked. "No. Cutting off aid is all we have to do. Time and nature will do the rest." 3 years after Howard's first term as president, a small energy company discovered a form of cold fusion. This would turn a small amount of seawater into a vast amount of electricity. The abundance of cheap electricity made electric cars and electric home heating more popular, lowering the world's dependence on oil. This in turn caused countries whose main export was oil to have to start controlling their population, and as expected, the snowball kept growing. Chapter 25. Allison Newcastle, the newly elected President of the United States, stood in the Oval Office. It was her first day as acting president. She had not yet taken a seat behind the desk. She was afraid if she did, she would wake up and discover this was all just a dream. Allison was the first woman elected to this office, and she understood what that meant. People would be watching every move she made, just waiting for her to slip up. The phone on her desk gave a low buzz. "Yes," Allison answered. "Madam President, the former president is here to see you." "Send him in." "Yes, ma'am." The former president walked in and over to Allison. They shook hands, and then the former president took a seat in front of the desk. Allison was still standing in the middle of the room. The former president gave her a curious look over his shoulder. "You're going to have to sit back there sooner or later," he said, indicating the chair behind the desk. Allison slowly walked behind the desk and took her seat. "See, nothing happened." "There is one more thing we have to attend to," the former president said as he reached into his coat pocket. He took out a small black book and laid it on the desk. "Is that what I think it is?" Allison asked. "That's it." I thought that was just a tall tale. Nope, it's real. And I have to do what it recommends? No, but I would strongly suggest that you do. Was it ever wrong? Nope. As Allison picked up the small book, the former president commented, "Actually, you're getting off easy. There's only one chapter left." Allison flipped to the last dog-eared page. The next chapter was labeled Preventive Maintenance. She read down the page quickly, then looked up. "Are you sure about this?" "I would have done it if I would have had another term." Allison pushed a button on her phone. "Yes, ma'am." "I need to schedule a meeting with Congress. They will be waiting for you at 2 o'clock this afternoon." "What are you talking about? There's no way you could set this up so fast." "Madam President, for the last 20 years, on their first day in office, the President has called for either a meeting of Congress or the Secretary of State. We have gotten to the point of prearranging these meetings." "I see. Well, you can tell the Secretary of State I won't be needing him today." "Yes, ma'am." Later that afternoon, Allison found herself addressing Congress. This was a lot more than she had expected for her first day, but nevertheless here she was. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you would direct your attention to the bill that's before you. To summarize, this bill will instate a law that will govern interest paid on loans. Essentially, it will be against the law for anyone, including the government, to charge more than 5% simple interest figured on the total of the loan. This is for any and all loans, including credit cards and home loans." Allison stopped at this point and waited. The Speaker of the House stood up and asked if he could be recognized. The Speaker was from New York State, where the big banks and credit card companies were based. Allison recognized and yielded to the Speaker. "With all due respect, Madam President, I'm going to have to fight you on this." Allison now did what no other president had done. She quoted directly from the Little Black Book. "Credit is just another form of slavery. Do you really want to go down this road, Mr. Speaker?" The Speaker looked around the room, then politely said, "No, Madam President, I would like to retract my earlier statement." 3 days later, the bill was signed into law. Chapter 26. April 2nd, 2207. Franklin Moorhead was driving along a small rural road. He checked his GPS unit, and it informed him that he was just getting to the city limits. To his right was a large field with a small creek running down one side. Franklin estimated the plot of land to be about 20 acres. As he got to one corner, there was a small for sale sign on the fence. This is perfect, he thought. Franklin continued on to the small town. He had no trouble finding the real estate office that matched the sign on the fence. As Franklin entered the real estate office, a young man jumped to his feet. "How can I help you, sir?" "That parcel on the south side of town, just at the city limits." "Yes, sir, that's a 25-acre lot. I'll pay the asking price if you can get the paperwork done today." This caught the young agent by surprise. He stopped and looked a little confused. Then, as if being jolted from a sound sleep, exclaimed, "I will make that happen." "Good. Now, where can I find their town's mayor?" "You can catch him at the cafe down the street at this time of day." Franklin walked up to the counter at the cafe and asked the waitress to point out the mayor. She obliged, and Franklin walked over to the table. "I'm looking for the mayor." One of the men seated at the table looked up and held out his hand. "I'm Mayor Nathan Cook," the man said as he shook Franklin's hand. "Mayor Cook, I'm Franklin Moorhead, Director of the National Park Service." "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Moorhead. How can I be of service?" "I need to meet with you and the head of your Planning and Zoning Department." "Well, that won't be difficult. He's sitting right there," the mayor said, motioning to the man seated to his left. "Pull up a chair and we can get started. What I have to say shouldn't be made public right away. We should go to your office." "Of course," the mayor said in a more professional tone. "If you will follow us, it's just down the street." As they walked to the mayor's office, Franklin called the real estate agent. "This is Franklin Moorhead. How are you coming on the paperwork?" It's sitting on my desk waiting for your signature. I'm with the mayor on the way to his office. Can you bring it down there? I'll be right there. As Franklin walked out of his meeting with the mayor and the real estate agent, he called Don Green. This is Franklin. Have you found the others yet? I've got 6 so far, came the reply. Okay, I've got the land and the permits. Send the construction crew to my location. They will leave within the hour. Great. And by the way, good job, Don. Thank you, sir. Franklin retrieved his car and drove to a local motel. It looked empty, which was not surprising given the location of the town. As Franklin walked up to the front desk, a short, round man cheerfully greeted him. How can I help you, sir? I need a room. Yes, sir. How many rooms does this hotel have? Franklin asked. We have 75 units, the man answered boastfully. I will need to reserve another 60 besides the one for me. Sure, the round man said, chuckling slightly. And will there be anything else? When he received no reply, the short, round man looked up from his computer terminal. His eyes widened as he looked at Franklin and realized he wasn't joking. Franklin handed the man his credentials and government credit card. Is there a problem? Absolutely not, came the answer, as the man's fingers seemed to find new life, and they flew over the keyboard. Franklin reflected on his assignment as he lay on the bed watching TV. This assignment had lasted for 5 years. He remembered when he was first given the task. He had thought someone was playing a practical joke. It had at first seemed impossible, but as his staff of historians had started digging, they had unearthed one clue that led to another, that had led to another, and so on. And now, within about 3 months, it would finally be over. The next day the construction crews arrived. This in itself stirred up the small town. Their first order of business was to construct a tall fence all the way around the property, mostly to secure the site and for safety. This further stirred up the residents. Rumors were flying around like wild birds. However, nobody went down to the courthouse to check the building permit that was filed and accessible to the public. It was more fun to talk about the greatly exaggerated rumors. 3 months later, the fence came down, and the residents of the small town were caught in complete surprise at what they saw. The 25 acres had been transformed into a giant park. One area contained a playground for children. Another was a dog park. Yet another was for picnics with small gazebos and tables and benches. Down the middle was a small stream that recycled itself. There were 3 small ponds along the stream that had been stocked with large koi fish. At the entrance to the park stood a 15-foot tall structure that was still covered with a heavy tarp. A small sign on the front gate read, "Park will be dedicated in 3 days." The morning of the dedication, the small town was swamped with visitors. News crews and camera trucks with satellite dishes on their roof. Even a few helicopters had landed in some open fields near town. The townspeople were completely awestruck. A small stage had been erected in front of the tall structure, which was now covered with a light silky material that resembled an American flag. At 12 o'clock, Franklin Moorhead walked out onto the stage. He was followed by Don Green and 6 other people. Franklin walked up to the microphone. Don and the others took a seat in a row of chairs behind the microphone. All morning a crowd had been gathering, and now it covered a third of the 25-acre park. Franklin cleared his throat and tapped the microphone to make sure it was on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to the dedication. He paused slightly. Our scientists and historians tell us that back in the 1990s and early 2000s, this country, and in fact the world, was on a downward spiral to destruction. Then, something happened that changed everything rather quickly, and it has just gotten better until we have the world we have today. Today, almost every disease has been cured or eradicated. Pollution is at an all-time low, and hunger is a thing of the past. I was given the task of tracing back through time and bringing to light what triggered this change. Our historians worked on this problem for almost 5 years, but finally we found the answer. It turns out that the actions of one man started the wheels turning and it is him you have to thank for the world we enjoy today. Now, I don't know if he intended to accomplish all this from the start, and we will never know. With that said, it is with great pride that I give you the newest national park and monument. Franklin reached for the rope tied to the silk cover. As he pulled the cover off, he announced, "I declare the Richard Davis Park open." As the cover fell away, it revealed a statue of Rich standing with an old hunting rifle in one hand. The plaque at the foot of the statue read, "Richard Davis, father of the Terminal Revolution." The crowd applauded for a good 10 minutes. When the applause died down, Franklin announced, "We were able to find some distant relatives of Rich's." With that, Franklin turned to the people seated behind him and joined the applause. An elderly gentleman seated next to Don got up and moved to the microphone. "When I was a young boy, my grandfather told me stories of Uncle Rich, and as I got older, I thought they were just bedtime stories. But as a family tradition, I told them to my kids and grandkids. I can't express how proud I am to find out they were all true. I think we'll start a new tradition and tell the stories at the foot of this statue. Thank you." As he returned to his seat, the applause roared again. At the back of the crowd, 3 figures stood by themselves, one of which was dressed completely in black. "Well, what do you think, Rich?" the man in black asked. "I never thought it would go this far," Rich replied. "I was just trying to make a small difference." "It only takes one match to start a forest fire," the man in black added. "Are you two ready to go back?" the dark man asked. "Yes," Rich replied, as he reached and took Susan's hand. The 3 of them turned and slowly walked into the park. The end. This has been The Terminal Revolution, written by W.R. Bottoms, narrated by W.R. Bottoms, copyright 2013, all rights reserved by W.R. Bottoms. All rights reserved, including the right of reproduction in any form, or by any mechanical or electronic means including photocopying or recording, or by any information storage or retrieval system, in whole or in part in any form, and in any case not without the written permission of the author. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents either are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously, and any resemblance to actual persons living or dead, business establishments, events, or localities is entirely coincidental. The author does not have any control over and does not assume any responsibility for third-party websites or their content. Okay, now let's do the prologue, or whatever you want to call it. I never was really much on the name of that, but what can I say? In the written version, it's titled A Note from the Author, and I don't have a clue when I put it in there. Just I thought about writing it at the time. But here's what it says. A few words about odds and ifs. To me, the term "what are the odds" and "what if" are closely related. When someone asks me a what if question, I instantly start to figure the odds of that actually happening, taking into account all the variables that I can think of. Now, if you've watched my vaping videos, I'm going to ad-lib a little bit here. If you've watched my vaping videos, my vaping channel, you'll know that quite often I reference going to the casino. Well, we go quite often, and I learned how to figure the odds, the mathematical odds on, basically any game that is a regular game. Now, the odds on a slot machine, you can figure them on the, well, you can actually figure those too, just by how many spots or stops are on each individual reel, but it gets to the point it's so high it's not worth figuring. But to give you an example, let's say you're at a dice table. The odds of rolling a 7 are 6 in 36, or 1 in 6, because you divide the 6 into 36. Okay? Now, some of them get a little more complicated, like being dealt a royal flush from a 52 card deck, and that's dealt, not drawn to. Okay? Those odds are 649,740 to 1. Now, those are long odds, but me and my wife both have had this happen to us on several occasions. So it does happen. How much of this can I paraphrase so it doesn't get too long? Well, let me just read this part. Okay, what does this have to do with the book, you ask? Well, the book has a lot of big what ifs. Some people would say this could never happen. I say the odds are just against it. The word never is a very strong word. Let me tell you a true story about odds that happened to me. My drive home from work is about 15 miles. The last 6 miles is on a 10-mile stretch of 2-lane highway that has no shoulder whatsoever. The road is pretty straight and goes down in a valley, so you can see 3 or 4 miles of the highway in either direction. The road has little traffic, so it was not uncommon that I had not met a car and there were none behind me. I did see an oncoming car a couple of miles up the road. As I got closer to my turnoff, I saw a man on a bicycle traveling in my direction in my lane. I had seen this man before. He rides his bike to town once or twice a month. Usually, because the road is so deserted, it's no big deal to swerve into the other lane to avoid him. But today, guess what? The only 2 cars and 1 bicycle on the whole stretch of highway met at the same point on the road, and that point was where I needed to turn left. Now, there was no wreck. I just hit my brakes hard and then made my left turn. But what are the odds of that happening? I go through at least 6 red lights on my way home. If I had caught any of them differently, the event would not have happened. If I had left work 10 seconds earlier or later, the event would not have happened. If the other driver or the bicycle rider had done anything differently, it would have changed the outcome of the event. What are the odds of this happening? I don't even know how to start to figure these kind of odds. Will it happen again? I say the odds are against it, but it did happen once. I hope you enjoyed the story. The next book I don't even have on audio yet. It's what I call a feeble attempt at a Western. I don't know what possessed me to write it, or even to try to write a Western, but anyhow, I tried. I hope you'll enjoy it too. Thanks for listening.